begins with a simple question, one that was never meant to be answered. Most people will merely ask the question without expecting any kind of response. Random events conspire to form the greater picture. It's only a matter of finding how
The Conduit is the Wii's premier shooter of all time. Developed by High Voltage Software, it was promised to not only be a graphical powerhouse and showcase for the Wii console, putting it in visual competition with the likes of Halo 3 and other competing console shooters of the time, but also boast some of the absolute best control customization out there. Now we can see that while it does not live up to the visual hype and fidelity of games like a Halo 3, it does show off some very clean and very impressive graphics for such an underpowered console. Gameplay was diversified in that there was not just a shooting element, but also some light puzzle solving, such as sections like this one involving the use of the ASE or All-Seeing Eye. This device allowed the player to see hidden locks, invisible messages, data disks, and other hidden surprises that are not visible to the player initially. The game does offer a wide variety of weaponry consisting of 3 distinct weapon types. You got your typical human weapons such as handguns, machine guns, rifles, rocket launchers, and grenades, but you also have drudge or alien weaponry and explosives, as well as trust weaponry, which is a clandestine government organization with top secret technology packed into their weapons.
But you'll still need to crouch and use cover. Find some cover. This is it.
Now, the plot and story of the game is a kind of tug-of-war scenario. So you play the role of Michael Ford, a government agent that is caught smack dab in the middle of a government/alien conspiracy. And as the game progresses and more evidence of an alien invasion approaching is witnessed, you are now tasked with stopping this disaster from happening, all the while being lied to and manipulated by the nefarious Mr. Adams, the head of the trust.
Who is this?
I'm Mr. Adams. I'm part of a clandestine
See, at first, you were being instructed and guided by a mysterious voice named Prometheus. However, once the player advances past the first level of the game flashes back in time to where you were being instructed and guided by Mr. Adams, who labels Prometheus a dangerous terrorist who is after the ASE.
I don't know, Mr. Ford. Something's wrong. I can't get in contact with my other agents. Be careful.
Now, of course, plot-wise, story-wise, it can all get a little convoluted. However, the gameplay and gunplay is where this game shines through and through, allowing the player to customize their control experience down to the slightest minute detail. I'm talking everything from Wiimote cursor sensitivity to bounding box size and cursor speed. You can truly tailor fit this experience to your own liking. Now, another thing that I find that makes this game so awesome is that there's a great amount of level variety in terms of design and aesthetic. I mean, you go everywhere from airports to subway trains, underground bunkers to government libraries to the White House itself. I mean, it gets pretty crazy. The enemy AI is also pretty spot on. You know, enemies are not just mindlessly standing in one place waiting to be killed, but they'll group up, they'll take cover, they'll try and surround you, and they'll come at you aggressively if you just try and hide. There's also some very good enemy variety, whereas you have your standard enemies, but you also have specialized enemies that can, fly or use specialized weapons. Also, there's some really cool boss encounters and boss fights where you're up against some gigantic alien foes, which breaks up any possible monotony in the combat. You're not just fighting the same enemy over and over again. The game also offered a very highly addictive online multiplayer deathmatch that I remember spending countless hours enjoying. I mean, the only negative with the multiplayer was that it was so easily hacked, and once that happened, there was no point or joy in playing it anymore. And with the Wii not being as online functional as other consoles of the time, it was never patched or fixed, which is a real shame. Having said that, all in all, this sci-fi shooter is definitely in my top 10 greatest Wii games of all time.
And performed a tremendous service to this great country of ours. It's truly a shame that you had to...
Super Mario Galaxy was Mario's first true 3D adventure for the Nintendo Wii, and was very highly anticipated ever since being shown off at Nintendo's 2006 E3 presentation. Nintendo gamers were constantly asking the question, when is Nintendo going to make a Super Mario game like Super Mario 64? Well, the Big N gave us all a resounding answer in November of 2007 with the launch of Super Mario Galaxy. This masterpiece was the true spiritual successor to Mario 64 in a lot of gamers' minds, as Sunshine on the GameCube differed wildly in gameplay. Now in this epic game, Mario takes to outer space as opposed to his usual Mushroom Kingdom tropes, which allowed for some truly innovative and revolutionary gameplay. The gameplay was truly unique as Mario could now run all around spherical planetoids as well as walk upside down on the bottom of objects due to the absence of gravity one tends to find in outer space. And there was really nothing like activating a fling star and watching Mario just launch out into space to land on another part of the level. Truly exhilarating. Now, the game does follow the usual and traditional star collecting formula, which was previously laid down by its 64-bit predecessor. On top of the usual stars that Mario can collect, there was also what's called Grand Stars, massively oversized stars that once collected added power and fuel to the observatory, allowing it to move further through space and unlocking other sections of the observatory, giving access to more galaxies. The Comet Observatory served as your hub world, kind of like the castle did in Super Mario 64, and it was through the observatory that you could gain access to the many different galaxies Mario must explore to save Princess Peach from Bowser. Each section or dome of the observatory houses a number of galaxies as well as an enemy base that all require a specific number of stars to gain access to. The enemy bases were usually boss levels where at the end you would encounter a fight with either Bowser or Bowser Jr. Now the game was truly a first for Mario in terms of its gameplay, as you could now walk up and down surfaces as well as all around them. I mean, every piece of a level had its own gravitational pull and orbit. Also, this is the tightest and most precise Mario has controlled since Mario 64, which is the gold standard. Now the Wii motion sensor controls a star cursor on the screen that you can use to collect colorful star bits, which can be used as a weapon to stun enemies, or can be used as currency that you would feed to hungry Lumas that give access to secret galaxies. The game also includes the usual slew of power-ups Mario has become accustomed to, as well as some brand new ones to switch up the gameplay dynamic. And you got the typical Fire Flower and Ice Flower, but as well as some newcomers like Bee Mario or Drill Mario. Of course, Nintendo remains the experts of giving you a specific power-up and crafting an entire level specifically around said power-up. Your boss fights, they were truly fun and engaging, but not all that difficult, which is the usual Mario recipe, and it's greatly appreciated here. Man, to this very day, it is still astonishing to me just how creative the minds at Nintendo truly are. I mean, look at this level design. The level design is vast and varied, from humongous multi-leveled areas to smaller segmented and broken up worlds. There's the typical snow, desert, meadowy, underwater, and haunted levels, as well as some really cool space station themed worlds. I mean, really, there's just so much to see and enjoy with this amazing three-dimensional platformer that just oozes perfection. I mean, we are literally talking 16 years later, and I can still go back and play through this game in its entirety, and I'm just as pleased with it now as I was on day one. You never get bored of this game. When it comes to the pantheon of Mario gaming, especially in 3D, I don't know if any game will ever top Super Mario 64 for me. However, I do know that playing this game was the very first time that notion was ever questioned in my mind. The game is truly special, and it will forever deserve a spot in my top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. It's really just that simple. Metroid Prime 3 Corruption is a definite must-own on the Nintendo Wii console. Make no mistake about it. Now, at the time of its release, it was declared to be the ending chapter of the Prime series, and was also the first Prime game to boast Nintendo's new motion control setup. Now let me tell you, in a time before the invention of Wii Motion Plus technology, which allowed for an even more precise level of motion control, Prime 3 still stands out as one of the absolute best motion-controlled gaming experiences I have ever experienced. I mean, there is just such a great implementation of motion control here, from activating a computer terminal by grabbing a canister, then pulling it out of its casing by physically pulling the Wiimote back towards you, turning it clockwise or counterclockwise, and then pushing the Wiimote forward, which results in reinserting that canister back into its casing in the game, is just amazing. We once again take on the role of our favorite bounty hunter not named Boba Fett in this gripping and enthralling space adventure taking place upon multiple worlds and not just one like in previous Prime games. The level and art design are truly sublime, and the game does somewhat visually rival games like Halo on other platforms. We encounter other hunters that Samus is familiar with, and they even contribute to the story and the action of it all. We still get that familiar Metroidvania style of gameplay, which includes backtracking with newly gained abilities to gain access to previously closed off paths of progress, and aiming Samus's arm cannon with the Wiimote is just a dream. And using the nunchuck's motion sensing capabilities by whipping it forward to attach her grapple lasso onto an enemy's armor and physically whipping the nunchuck back towards you to rip that armor off is just as immersive as it can possibly get. In this game, you will do battle with all of her familiar abilities and weapons, such as charge shots, missiles of various kinds, the morph ball, the grapple lasso, and so many more. The boss fights are always epic in scale and visually impressive, and as in all Prime games, this one's enemy design is just top-notch in every single regard. The game also has a very cinematic quality, as there are many beautifully animated cutscenes that tell the story, however are not too long as to overstay their welcome. And come on, let's be real, who didn't have their bottom jaw hit the floor the first time that they encountered Metal Ridley? I mean, that boss fight alone was just so epic. I mean, there's just a lot that can be said about this amazing first-person adventure that takes the Metroid Prime series into uncharted waters. But suffice it to say, this is exactly why it belongs on my top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. Wii Sports. This game was an absolute stroke of genius by Nintendo because they packed it in with every Nintendo Wii back in 2006 when the console launched. So when you purchased a Nintendo Wii, before you had ever bought a game, you already had a game packed in, just like they used to do back in the day with the Super Nintendo and the original NES. Both of those came with pack-in games. So they did that with the Wii, but it was also a stroke of genius because not only did that give the gamer a game right off the bat, but it was basically a tech demo that showed the world what the Wii was about and what motion controls were capable in the world of gaming. It was basically a 5-game or 5-activity minigame collection, 5 sporting activities: bowling, baseball, tennis, golf, and boxing. And it basically showed gamers, especially less experienced gamers, that you didn't have to be punching in difficult button combinations to play your favorite sports games. You literally could just pick up a Wii remote and go through the motion of whatever you wanted to see on the screen. So if you were playing tennis and the ball was coming towards your character and you wanted to hit the ball, you would swing the Wii remote like it was a tennis racket. You know, if you were playing baseball and they pitch it at you and you're the batter, you're going to swing the Wii remote like a baseball bat when the ball gets near you. So it was a lot easier for less experienced gamers, much more intuitive, and it really kicked off the motion control revolution. I mean, this is where Nintendo kicked in the door with motion controls and just took the industry by storm. So you see right there on-screen cues telling you this is the motion that you make to do this particular action. Like I said before, it's 5 games: bowling, tennis, golf, boxing, and baseball. Out of the 5 games you can pick, 4 out of the 5 only require a Wii remote to control and to play. It's only boxing that requires both the Wiimote and the nunchuck. Since 4 of the 5 only required the Wii remote, it was much easier. It didn't confuse things for less experienced gamers. I mean, grandma can play this, auntie can play this, and it's not going to be an issue. They're going to be able to get it right off the bat. And this game led to a lot of new gamers entering the gaming world. That was Nintendo's whole strategy with the Wii console itself, the Blue Ocean strategy. They wanted to expand the universe of gamers. They wanted to expand the gaming audience, and this did it, man. You don't know how many family tournaments this inspired all around the world. People sitting around their couch, mom, dad, kids, grandparents, all that playing video games together. This was the genesis of that. I mean, I know when I first got my Wii, and I set up the console and created my Mii characters, which is basically in-game avatars. This game, Wii Sports, right out of the box, uses your Miis. So you had Mii integration into games right off the bat with Nintendo, with the launch of this game and the launch of this console. But man, me and my friends, once I set up my Wii, we sat around, me, my ex-wife, me and a bunch of friends that would come over to the apartment. We sat there and for hours played Wii Sports, whether it be the boxing especially, the boxing, the baseball, the golf, all of it. Super competitive, super addicting, super fun. And that's what Nintendo was going with for this game. Truth be told, out of all top 10 greatest Wii games that I have on this list and in this video, this is the most simplistic one, graphically, gameplay-wise, and all of that. But it's still the one that arguably had the biggest impact out of any of them, because this launched the entire Wii generation. And for that, and its epicness, its epic multiplayer ability, its fun and engaging nature, is why it belongs in my top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. Mario Kart Wii is a true innovator in the world of kart racing. Launching on April 27, 2008, it was the first in the franchise to introduce a number of new gameplay dynamics to an already chaotically fun series. For the initial release of the game, it was packaged with the Wii Wheel accessory. This was a plastic steering wheel shaped shell for the Wiimote that would allow the player to simulate actual driving during gameplay. The game also allowed Wiimote control, Wiimote and Nunchuk control, as well as GameCube controller support. Now the roster was large and diverse for the time in which the game came out, and the item variety was great. All your classics like red and green shells, boost mushrooms, power stars, and banana peels make their return. However, this time they are accompanied by some newcomers, such as bullet bills, lightning clouds, and POW blocks. The game also introduces a new class or type of vehicle with the introduction of bikes. Now this enhanced the strategic element of gameplay, as players now had to make a decision on what type of vehicle to select, as both karts and bikes had their certain pros and cons. Mario Kart Wii also introduced 3 new ways to get a speed boost. Players can now tailgate behind another rider and receive a slipstream boost that can be used not only to whip around in front of that rider, but also to ram or bump them off track. You can also get a quick speed boost if you perform a trick going off a boost ramp. Now this is performed simply by waggling or swinging the Wii remote as your rider goes off the edge of a boost ramp. And the third way, it's exclusive to bikes. Whenever you're going down a straightaway on a bike, you can pull the Wii remote back towards your body and your rider will perform or execute a wheelie, which gives a slight speed boost but also leaves you extremely vulnerable to being bumped. Of course, whenever discussing any Mario Kart game, multiplayer is at the very heart of the matter. Mario Kart Wii features 4-player split-screen racing as well as 4-player battle mode. But the real star of the show here is the newly introduced online multiplayer. Now, while many may have their concerns with Nintendo concerning anything online, and rightfully so, it pleases me greatly to report that Mario Kart Wii is possibly the best and smoothest running online experience the Wii had to offer. Gameplay was smooth and lag-free, and tearing up the track with 11 other players worldwide was a dream come true back in 2008. Battle Mode Online was also amazing to experience and incredibly addicting. To this very day, long after the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection has been shut down, there are still thousands in the modding community that have managed to get Mario Kart Wii back up and running online in 2023 and are currently enjoying this classic once again. The longevity of this particular installment is impressive, and it's reasons like the ones I've mentioned here that this epic kart racer needs to be cemented in the annals of Wii legend on my top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. I remember playing both Donkey Kong Country 1 and 2 obsessively on my SNES as a child. Even the much less remembered, still high in quality third installment got some major playtime for me as a youngster. But that will be the last we saw of this amazing side-scrolling platformer for over 2 generations of Nintendo hardware. And then, 2010 came around, and the waiting and yearning were over. Donkey Kong Country Returns made its debut on the Wii and brought back that jungle goodness in every way we ever wanted. One thing I love right off the bat from this installment is that the story, however basic, is new and actually being pushed forward. Gone are the Kremlins and K. Rool, here are the Tikis. New tribal-like enemies that have invaded DK Island and through their hypnotic melodies have enslaved all the creatures on the island and turned them on DK and Diddy. From the opening theme, we can all hear the magic of David Wise, original series composer, as every note your ears hear just screams DKC. Level design is just masterfully done as DK and Diddy visit lush jungles, dark mines, tropical coastlines, stormy plains, and much, much more. It is truly amazing just how much depth these levels have, especially for a 2D platformer. Now, we get all the traditional gameplay tropes we're used to from a DKC game, such as, bonus levels, collecting bananas, collecting balloons, collecting the KO and G letters, stuff like that. But now there's a new collectible as well in the form of puzzle pieces. Every level has a set number of them hidden throughout, and collecting all the puzzle pieces in the game will unlock a super challenging hidden world. There are also a number of new abilities that DK possesses that allow him to interact in the world more than ever before, uncovering hidden collectibles. He can ground pound, he can blow out flowers or flames, and he can roll through enemies. There's also areas that require you to throw an enemy shell or a barrel to break a barrier and progress forward. But one of my favorite gameplay dynamics here is to fire yourself from a barrel to the background of a level to uncover a secret or a new way to progress in the level. This gives an otherwise strictly 2D game some 3-dimensional depth. Oh, and speaking of barrels, don't worry, there are plenty of barrel-to-barrel blasting sections to make you feel right at home in this world. Some of them even throw in a 3D element as the camera rotates around the action. And yes, animal sidekicks make a return, however, unfortunately, it's only Rambi. But hey, I'll take it. Of course, minecart levels are also back and just as thrilling as they ever were. Now, every world as expected has a boss fight waiting at the end of it, and each one gets a little bit more challenging as you near the last world, with the final boss battle of the game being one of the most challenging boss fights I've ever been through. There is, however, one flaw I did find with this game. It's something that its sequel, Tropical Freeze on the Wii U, rectified, and that's just that there's just no underwater levels. Now that's a real shame, seeing as how those levels were always fun to play and had the very best music in the older games. However, sticking with the vein of innovation, the minecart levels now have a brand new sibling, and that sibling is the rocket barrel levels. It's the same concept, but this time you control a rocket barrel's altitude by holding and releasing the A button as you scroll through the level, avoiding obstacles. Donkey Kong Country Returns shines from beginning to end on the Wii. Character and world design are of the highest quality, music is just supreme, action is non-stop, and the vibe is just DKC overload. It also features 2-player co-op with the second player controlling Diddy. Without a doubt, a top 10 greatest Wii game of all time. Super Smash Bros. Brawl, much like Mario Kart Wii, was an innovator within its own franchise. Coming off the stellar Melee on GameCube, Nintendo knew they had to go big with this one. And boy, they did not miss the target. Boasting the biggest roster yet, along with a myriad of control options that included everyone's favorite controller, the GameCube controller, they were sure to make this the biggest and baddest Smash Bros. To date. As a matter of fact, I can still remember the lead up to March of 2008, constantly checking the Smash Dojo website for screenshots, updates, and reveals about the game. The hype for this one was at a fever pitch. This is actually one of the few Wii games I could remember going to a midnight launch for it. And let me tell you, everyone in that GameStop was at the same level of frenzy I was to get their hands on the latest Smash Bros. Game. Now, the game included so much of the usual fare, single player mode, multiplayer mode. There was an online multiplayer mode, but seeing as how now in 2023 Nintendo on the Switch still can't get Smash Bros. Online to run properly, the less said about that one, the better. However, it did introduce the absolute king of story modes for all Smash Bros. Games, the Subspace Emissary. I mean, this was everything anyone had ever hoped for in a story mode for an adventure-themed gameplay experience featuring all of Nintendo's most popular characters. Thing is, and not only were a lot of them playable and they all interacted with each other throughout the progression of the story, but it actually fit. It brought the whole concept of Smash Bros. Into crystallizing realization. Now, some gamers do lament that this entry in the franchise was more aimed at the casual audience, with a slower speed of play and the introduction of things like tripping, and that's somewhat fair. However, it's still an excellent Smash Bros. Game. I mean, going from Melee to this one, you can easily see the increase in power that the Wii had over the GameCube just in stage design alone. I mean, stages were crazy. There was so much more happening in the background, and a lot of it actually affecting the battlefield as you fought. I mean, just look at the Meta Knight stage or the Star Fox stages just to get an idea of what I'm saying. Not only is all that madness happening in the background and possibly affecting the foreground, but the frame rate stays consistent and you never really get a hiccup in the smoothness of the gameplay experience. Now, Subspace Emissary is just absolutely epic, and every Nintendo fan deserves the opportunity to play through that greatness at least once. But it's not the only way in which this title innovated for the franchise. No. Super Smash Bros. Brawl was the first time any non-Nintendo third-party characters were included among the active roster. Just think about that for a second. For the first time ever, players would be able to pit Sonic the Hedgehog against Mario and see who would come out on top. They would be able to have a confrontation between Link and Solid Snake and see who was the superior gaming hero. If that alone doesn't blow your mind, it's also the first Smash to include Final Smashes. For the first time in franchise history, a glowing orb with the Smash logo would float around the screen, and whoever broke that orb gained the ability to perform a Final Smash, meaning that character's signature ultra-powerful attack that would almost certainly result in knockouts. There's a lot more I can say about this amazing crossover fighter, but I guess I'll just cap it with, it is absolutely, most definitely, one of the top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. Hey Nintendo, you guys have made the absolute best 3D action adventure platformer of all time. I mean, surely there's no way that you could ever top Super Mario Galaxy. So I guess the question now is, what do you do now? Answer from the big N? Oh, that's an easy one. I'm glad you asked it. We top it. Now that's basically what Nintendo did in a ridiculously short turnaround period with the divinely crafted Super Mario Galaxy 2. See, in roughly 2.5 years, Nintendo did it again with a brand new, full-fledged, three-dimensional Mario adventure through the stars. Now look, I'm not usually big on putting two games from the same franchise on a top 10 list for any console. But when both the games are this good, I mean, what am I supposed to do? The fact of the matter is, both of these titles are just ridiculously good across the board in all aspects of rating any game. Now, Nintendo did leave a lot on the cutting room floor when they launched the first Galaxy due to wanting to get the game out by launch date. So, when he was questioned on the origin of a Galaxy sequel, Mr. Miyamoto, the god, was adamant that they wanted to do so much more with the first game and just simply ran out of time. However, not being one to let his genius just fade into obscurity, he quickly got the team back together and they crafted a technically superior game to the first Galaxy that included all those wonderful little star bits that were left out of the original. When you first look at Galaxy 2, there's definitely a slight bump in the graphical department. It's nothing massive, but a trained eye can spot it. The worlds are also much more expansive in size and scope, and the same gravity-defying gameplay is present as it was in the original, but it's been bumped up even more and innovated upon drastically throughout the progression of the game. One of the differences, and it's one I don't like over the original, though some do, is that the hub world is severely reduced in scope in favor of a traditional Mario level map screen, a la Super Mario 3 or Super Mario World. Ever since Peach's Castle in Super Mario 64, I just never wanted to go back to a traditional level select map, and I kinda wince every single time Nintendo tried to force it down our throats. But on the plus side, one of the new additions to the game that is just amazing and shows you the real reason this game needed to exist is the inclusion of Mario's dinosaur sidekick, Yoshi. Now, once you find him, and it's very early in the game when you do, the two form an inseparable bond that it just has to be played and experienced to understand how great the inclusion of Yoshi in the game really is. Gameplay is expanded on even more by the abilities that Yoshi brings to the table, and the platforming as a whole benefits greatly as a result of this. Also, there's a lot of areas that are made easier to traverse or to get through if Yoshi is with you, as opposed to if he's not. Bottom line, it's just really great to finally get to play with this duo in a 3D space after having imagined how it would be for all those years. And Yoshi himself also benefits from certain power-ups that affect him specifically, really diversifying the gameplay. You kinda gotta think of Yoshi himself as a power-up. And as per usual, there are entire sections of the game that Nintendo has built specifically around the inclusion of Yoshi. At the end of the day, it's just a bigger, better Mario Galaxy. Though I personally enjoy the first just a little bit more, there's no denying the sequel's technical superiority. And the improvements that they have made to the original formula secure Galaxy 2's spot in the top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. If you think back to the launch of the Nintendo Wii, way back in November of 2006, you may begin to remember the launch lineup for the console. Yeah, there were a couple of sports games. Tony Hawk's Downhill Jam comes to mind. Of course, we all knew about the pack-in title Wii Sports, and who could forget The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. But then there was also Red Steel from Ubisoft. This was a first-person shooter based around Yakuza-like storytelling that also featured the ability to wield a katana sword. In Nintendo's 2006 E3 showing, Ubisoft showed off the impressive-looking game to widely positive audience reaction. However, when the game was actually released and able to be enjoyed by the public, it didn't fare all that well. Don't get me wrong, it's not like it was a dud by any means. It just fell drastically short of Ubisoft and Nintendo's expectations. And that would normally spell doom for any potential sequels. However, in March of 2010, Ubisoft hit us with the release of Red Steel 2. Now understand that this game has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the original save for the title. This time around, Ubisoft went for more of a samurai meets cowboy type of universe and boasted a vibrant graphic novel type of cel-shaded art style. The protagonist is a nameless cowboy/samurai that is the last living member of the Kusagari clan. Now, it's important to note that Ubisoft made this a Motion Plus title, meaning it couldn't be played without the Motion Plus accessory. This is because the game was very motion control centered and required Motion Plus for that level of precise motion control. The game makes use of the same gameplay dynamic its predecessor did, being a first-person shooter in which, at any moment, a swing of the Wiimote would bring out your katana sword. Now, I can personally vouch for the preciseness of the motion gestures in this game. It is definitely one of the absolute best motion control games I have ever had the pleasure of playing. Combat is fast-paced, frenetic, and exciting, as you have a myriad of ways to dispose of your enemies. And the world around you gives off this old-school Western movie vibe. And really, I never knew how good cowboys and samurais mixed until I played this title. Unfortunately, the enemy variety isn't that great, as there are only a handful of enemy types you'll be tangoing with throughout the experience. There is some diversity. I mean, you have standard enemies that range in appearance and weapon usage. They're always masked in some way, whether they have a metal face mask or ninja cowls, and they use a combination of swords, war hammers, and firearms. But let's be honest, when you're having this much fun being a samurai/cowboy, aiming your 6-shooter or Tommy gun with the Wiimote pointer and instantly comboing and carving them up with your katana sword, enemy variety doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, it's just so satisfying to combo up an enemy with a katana and finish them off with a headshot. Or you could even begin your attack with a shot from your gun to stun the enemy, then go in for some katana goodness, finishing them off by running them through with your sword. It honestly never gets old, and just makes the game exciting and engaging throughout. Also, you'll learn special sword techniques that allow you to take on entire groups at once, or drop all enemies in one strike. And you can also level up your armor whenever you get to certain allied bases. Also, there's some really cool boss battles that happen throughout, and also some really nice animated cutscenes at certain points to drive the narrative forward. I mean, one really cool section is the very opening of the game, when you're being dragged by your hands from the back of a motorcycle. If you haven't played that, go do so now, and thank me later. The game is also packed with great character design and performances, especially from those who make up your group of allies. You got everything from the traditional no-nonsense sensei to the old saloon-owning elderly cowboy. It's just a really fun game through and through, but the star of this show is truly the gameplay during combat. Using your katana sword to block oncoming bullets and then go to town on your enemies while using the lock-on system so you're not caught off guard from behind, it's just magical. Ubisoft really redeemed themselves from the first game with this absolute gem, and for all these reasons, it definitely belongs in the top 10 greatest Wii games of all time. I remember the first time I ever played The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time back on the N64. That moment I stepped out into Hyrule Field and saw that sunset and the moonrise, I realized I was playing potentially the greatest game of all time. The sense of freedom and openness in that game world blew my teenage mind out of my skull. Fast forward 8 years and I couldn't believe it myself, but I was playing a new Zelda game that, for me, eclipsed the mighty Ocarina of Time. I was playing a game that did everything Ocarina of Time did, but did it bigger, better, and prettier. I was exploring a Zelda world that dwarfed any before it in size and scope, and to use Reggie Fils-Aimé's own words, was the most beautiful game Nintendo had ever made. I'm talking about none other than The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Originally intended for the Nintendo GameCube to make amends to fans for a promise made at Space World 2000, this title found its way into the launch lineup for the Nintendo Wii and quickly became the system's killer app in November of 2006. It did still release on the Cube, but at a later date. This was the game I had my heart set on from the moment I knew it was launching with the Wii. I went and pre-ordered it at a local GameStop in preparation for Wii's launch, knowing that while I would still have fun with Wii Sports and whatever other launch game I bought, this was the one that was truly going to usher in the next generation of Nintendo for me. From the opening cinematic, I was hooked on the game's unbelievable beauty. Zelda games always have a fantasy look, and this one is no different in that regard, but there was just a grittiness and a realism that I saw in the game's look coupled with the fantasy. The game begins in similar fashion to Ocarina, with Link in his village doing some menial tasks to get you grounded on the controls in the game world. However, after this section is completed, things pick up 100-fold, and the action doesn't let up. After your friends are kidnapped by Bubblins, you set out to save them, coming face to face with this alien-looking wall of twilight. Link is pulled through the barrier by a creature of darkness, and thus, now you're in the Twilight Realm. This is an alternate version of Hyrule, where Twilight has engulfed the land and the living are now in the form of spirits. Link also undergoes a transformation in this realm, as he is now a wolf, which really diversifies the gameplay as you explore the Twilight Realm, only to end up at Hyrule Castle, where Zelda herself tells you what has happened to the land of Hyrule this time. From there, the story goes on, and I don't want to spoil anything for gamers who haven't played it yet. Suffice it to say, it's one hell of a Zelda story, and one that's much darker in tone and nature than the usual. Think Majora's Mask, but without that stupid 3-day time mechanic, remember that? And of course, Link controls like a dream, and the inclusion of motion controls is a godsend. From swinging your Wiimote to swing your sword, to aiming your slingshot, hookshot, or bow and arrow with the pointer, it's all gold. And as in every Zelda game in the 3D era other than Breath of the Wild, you have a sidekick. Now Midna is perhaps the best sidekick Link has ever had, as she's not annoying, she's comical, and she offers some actual abilities that will aid Link in his quest. The dungeon design is the best in the entire series in my opinion, and the game world is the biggest and most beautiful the series had seen up until this point. It's even bigger in scale than the world in Skyward Sword, which actually came out after this. It's just something to think about. The enemy variety is great, with a plethora of different enemy types, and boss battles are as epic as they have ever been. It was truly an indescribable joy to explore the many different regions of Hyrule that we've all seen before, but with this level of detail and this grand scale and size. Honestly, Hyrule has never looked better or been as huge as it is in this game. Popular locations like the Ranch, Death Mountain, and Lake Hylia all look amazing with the power of the Wii. This is definitely an adventure that should not be missed by any Nintendo Wii owner. And it's no wonder that this game finds itself in the top 10 greatest Wii games of all time.